We're going to look at it and engage different stakeholders to make sure that the statement has been achieved, or the objective of their statement has been achieved. Otherwise, I want to support the motion and say that we are going to look at it as a committee. Thank you.
Before I call upon the majority leader to make a statement, allow me, honorable senators, to make this communication. In the public gallery, we have 64 students, accompanied by 7 teachers from Lona Laboso Memorial Girls Secondary School in Bomet County, who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate, on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Bomet in the. I will allow Senator for Bomet, Wakili Sigei, to make very brief welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to welcome the students from Bomet County. Lona Laboso Girls is a memorial school that was established courtesy of the first female member of parliament for the constituency called Sotik. In the year 2012, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable, the late Joyce Laboso actualized the institution now, which is represented by the beautiful girls in the gallery today. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome them and encourage them to carry the flag, which was carried by the first female MP whose name is inscribed in the institution that they represent today. Similarly, to carry high the flag of the first female governor of Bomet County, the late Joyce Laboso, who actualized the institution. This is a house where rules are made. Honorable Joyce Laboso was a deputy speaker in the National Assembly. I am very sure and convinced that the spirit that she had and the investment that she made in the institution that you are in now will be carried higher by you. And I want to encourage you to work hard, celebrate the 2 beautiful names that you carry in the school, and show the world and Bomet County at large that indeed the 2 ladies are great ladies and you want to emulate them in your future. I welcome you to the Senate. I also ask you to enjoy every moment of it and learn so that you carry back home the new and important lessons that you've picked from this house. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I encourage them to learn more than just being here.
Senator Ledama, what is your point of order? Senator Cheriot, Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 57-2 to make a statement on the occasion of the 10-year anniversary of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I expected if senators were concentrating to applaud that this House has lived to see its 10th birthday, the second session of a Senate. It's not by chance, Mr. Speaker, or rather guaranteed that this House, given the kind of challenges that we've had over the years, both from within and without, that we'll live to see these days. On March the 28th, 2013, the Senate of the Kenya held an inaugural sitting, technically marking the second Senate after the first Senate under the Independence Constitution was disbanded in 1967 and the first Senate under the 2010 Constitution. This second Senate, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of Speaker Right Honorable Ekwe Othuro, EGH MP, marked one of the most significant milestones in the country's constitutional history. The coming into being of the Senate heralded a new dawn for our legislature, hitherto unicameral, and was now comprising the National Assembly and the Senate. The term of the second Senate ran from 28 March 2013 to the 15th of June 2017, Mr. Speaker. Needless to say this, that the Senate was sailing in uncharted waters. None of the political leadership and the senators who had earlier had a clear idea of what their task entailed. They had to learn how to swim by actually swimming. It was trial and error at first. However, the Speaker and his leadership team guided the unity of purpose and the will to actualize devolution, initiated work, systems, and spearheaded a series of retreats, workshops, and seminars that rapidly crafted the framework of transacting and administering the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, to entrench its place, the Senate began its mandate by fighting for its space and its place in the new organization of government, including its relationship with the National Assembly, in executing its mandate as contained in Article 96 of the Constitution. To name just but a few of those memorable times, in the 11th Parliament was an entrenching mandate of the Senate in the consideration of the annual Division of Revenue Bill, a matter that was eventually determined by the Supreme Court in favor of the Senate, the infamous advisory opinion number 1 of 2013. The second Senate, among its other milestones, Mr. Speaker, set in place the procedure to be followed upon the receipt of resolution from a county assembly on the impeachment by assembly of a governor or a deputy governor. This marked the stage for the first impeachment hearing of a county governor, which happened in 2014. Mr. Speaker, sir, the term of the Third Senate in the 12th Parliament commenced on 31st August 2017, with 67 elected senators taking the oath of office and electing the Right Honorable Ken Lusaka, MP, as Speaker. The Third Senate represents a the consolidation stage of the Senate. Some fundamental achievements of the Third Senate include the determination of matters such as the admissibility and constitutionality of the powers of a deputy governor in running county government business, where the governor is charged in court or is away for extended periods due to other reasons. Other fundamental achievements include measures to resolve the stalemate on the delayed enactment of Division of Revenue Bill and its impact on the county finances, and the implication of the High Court judgment on the Constitutional Petition 284 of 2019 that challenged the laws that were enacted and procedural. That remains to be one of our memorable days of this House, Mr. Speaker, last Parliament, when we all walked hand in hand from right here in the Senate chambers all the way to Milimani Law Courts. And I see many colleagues in the House today who made the infamous march, Mr. Speaker. That day secured our place in history, Mr. Speaker. Had we not pushed back on an executive fully backed by the National Assembly that was keen on extinguishing this House, Mr. Speaker, I am not sure whether we'd be here gathered this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I celebrate all the senators that joined us on that graceful march that morning. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the Third Senate, we initiated inaugural sittings of the Senate outside Nairobi. Actually, should be in the Third Senate. We initiated the inaugural sittings of the Senate outside Nairobi, commonly dubbed Senate Mashinani. These sittings showcased and entrenched the place of the Senate as an institution mandated to represent and protect the interest of counties and their governments, as highlighted in Article 96 of the Constitution. So far, Uasin Gishu and Kitui have hosted and will continue with this practice, and we shall continue as a Senate with this practice into the future. You are aware, Mr. Speaker, that I think 2 weeks ago, I did move a motion in this House, and colleague senators were gracious enough to agree with me that we carry on with this program, and there is already set in place a technical committee that is scouting for the ideal venue of the third edition of the Senate Mashinani. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to that edition later on this year. As you may recall, Article 96, Mr. Speaker, 6 of the Constitution of Kenya provides the Senate determines the allocation of national revenue among counties. Article 176 of the Constitution establishes the county governments which are mandated to perform the functions stipulated under Part 2 of the 4th schedule to the Constitution. Under the principles of devolved government, the county government shall have reliable sources of revenue to enable them to govern and deliver services effectively. One of the major achievements of the Third Senate was a fight for increased resources for counties. Consequently, we have observed a consistent increase in shareable revenue from Kenya shillings 190 billion in 2013-2014 financial year to the current Kenya shillings 370 billion for financial year 2022-2023, representing a consistent annual average growth of 35%. Mr. Speaker, that was an important fight that we fought together as a House. The infamous, or the rather famous in the Senate, revenue formula debacle that lasted a good 10 weeks, Mr. Speaker. With all the intrigues and all the challenges that came with it, senators stood firm in this House. And thanks to Senate fighting together as a House, we had a steep jump in resources allocated to counties. In fact, the previous year, 2020-2021 financial year had been 316 billion. But thanks to that fight, we were able to grow it to 370 billion in the subsequent financial year, courtesy of the good work that senators did. Another hallmark of the Third Senate was the consideration and the passage of the third basis for revenue allocation among county governments. Through robust debates, the Senate emerged stronger than ever before and demonstrated its commitment. Mr. Speaker, these 10 years have not been without its challenges, but the Senate rose to the task and committed to upholding the principles of democracy, transparency, and accountability. This milestone marks a decade of dedicated service to the people of Kenya, as the Senate has played a vital role in shaping the country's legislative and governance agenda. Through its oversight role, the Senate has ensured that the public resources are used for the better of Kenyans and has held public officials accountable for their actions. As we commemorate this milestone, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the hard work and the dedication of the current and former senators who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the Senate remains a strong and effective institution. We acknowledge the support of the Kenyan people who have placed their trust in the Senate to represent their interests. Mr. Speaker, just reflecting upon, I thought as well on some of what many might consider to be among the highs, just as I've listed quite a number, and what perhaps where there is a high, Mr. Speaker, there has to be a low. The world and life generally is sinusoidal. It rises and it falls. And I remember quite a number. The passage of the security laws, Mr. Speaker, Amendment Bill of 2014, quite a difficult and a challenging time for us in Parliament. The passage of the revenue generation sharing formulas, the three of them, Mr. Speaker, have been quite a challenge in this House, Mr. Speaker. I have been lucky to witness all three, Mr. Speaker, and I know while each has been unique and has had its own difficulties and nuances associated with dividing anything money-related, Mr. Speaker, each has been unique, but I'm glad that on all three occasions, Senate emerged the winner. Of course, the first and the second Senate Mashinani sittings in Kitui goes down as a high. Mr. Speaker, the suspension of the Senate sittings in solidarity with senators arrested over the second generation revenue sharing formula. That was quite a high. We came together and pulled together close ranks across political party divides, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that our colleagues who had been arrested in the course of their duty were brought back to this House before debate could commence on anything, Mr. Speaker. That was quite a high. It's not every day, Mr. Speaker, that colleagues close ranks and fight for each other. Oversight of the county, oversight of county governments and assemblies by Senate committees are quite an important exercise that we partake through our various committees, Mr. Speaker. Well-coordinated impeachment processes bringing order to county governments, Mr. Speaker. We have saved governors on these floors. We've hanged some, Mr. Speaker. Both very difficult experiences. On days where we have acquitted some, hasn't been easy. Most of the times, Mr. Speaker, we've had to sit until very late at night. There are some that we've sat up to almost 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning because of statutory deadlines, Mr. Speaker. But all in all, we guided the specific county assemblies in the right way, complete with a exit report from the committee or the plenary, Mr. Speaker, guiding them on what to do and handle a particular situation. What are some of our laws, Mr. Speaker, as a House, the past 10 years as I reflect and think through? Quickly off my mind, Mr. Speaker, I remember the stalemate with the National Assembly and the National Government over the division of revenue bill. Quite famous in the 10th Parliament, Mr. Speaker. No, the 11th Parliament, where National Assembly was grappling with appreciating that Senate had arrived, we were the new kid on the block, and we were ready and willing to defend the place of devolution in our Constitution. And therefore, on many afternoons, the National Assembly spent useful public time discussing individual senators as opposed to our position and what we stood for in the family of devolution, Mr. Speaker. It hasn't been an easy time. Secondly, of course, arrest of senators, colleagues, Senator Cleophas Malala, Senator Christopher Langat, and Senator Dr. Lutumbesi Lelegwe over standoff on related to the passage of second generation formula. That was quite a difficult time for us as a House, but I appreciate what we did together, all of us, those that were in support of the formula as proposed, those that were against, we all stood firm and said the state had taken their game too far. And until we were given a credible explanation of where our colleagues were, they were unconditionally released, that's when debate resumed, Mr. Speaker. Of course, Council of Governors and Senate standoff over oversight funds, especially conditional grants, and the High Court judgment limiting oversight mandate of the Senate. That was quite a low, Mr. Speaker. I must speak of it. And on that afternoon, when we retreated back to reflect on the judgment of the High Court, where the judge, in his finding, tried to limit the role of the Senate in oversighting funds to the specific counties, which funds we could go through, that was a difficult moment. Because on one hand, Mr. Speaker, you have the public charging at you and demanding of you that you're the senator for Siaya, senator for Nyamira, senator for Nyandarua. What are you doing as Governor XYZ is misappropriating public funds? The courts on the other side are telling us that you cannot do that on certain specific things that ordinary citizens don't understand. All they want is to see public money spent prudently. That was quite a low time for us. Of course, delay in constituting of committees and changes in leadership position for majority and minority side. We've had this fight, this particular session on the minority side. For a greater part of last term, we had this particular challenge on the majority side, Mr. Speaker. Not a very easy time when people have got to let go of leadership position, Mr. Speaker. Hasn't been an extremely easy time. And perhaps over time, this is a question that Senate needs to resolve, because much as it is difficult here in the Senate, more difficult in the county assemblies. And they draw from the experience in the Senate. I know for a fact that there are county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, that up to now, session, just trying to resolve who is the majority leader. And therefore, it's a challenge to us as a House, because we are the protectors and the custodians of devolution. Thinking about this, Mr. Speaker, perhaps either by legislation or provide a clear guidance on how to achieve on the positions of leadership here in the Senate as well as in our county assembly. Of course, failure by governors in the 11th Parliament to honor summons, quite a number, many have been fined. Unfortunately, in the Powers and Privilege Act, we haven't provided for how to, we don't have the mechanism. You know, Parliament and Senate doesn't have, we cannot send our sergeant at arms to go and arrest governors who have refused to show up or have jumped bail, haven't paid their fines. We need to think through and consider that. Of course, removal of senators from office was quite a difficult time for us as well. You remember the case of Senator Mwaura, Senator Professor Kindiki, Wetangula, and Senator Kangata. That was quite a difficult time for us. Of course, delays of processing of Senate bills during the 11th and 12th Parliament. We haven't faced this challenge yet. I have to be optimistically cautious, Mr. Speaker, so that I don't get ahead of myself, because I know how, I've been around fairly long enough to know that when it's all rosy when you're beginning terms of Parliament. But as you get deep and deep into the term, and there are disagreements between both houses, then the urge to withdraw or to ignore the Senate, rather, Mr. Speaker, clicks in. And on those occasions, you find that Senate ends up suffering. Mr. Speaker, finally, just as a way of concluding, and this I have picked randomly, I am just reflecting on colleague senators that we've had the privilege of serving with over the last 10 years, and moments and things that they did that will remain forever etched in the memory or the history of Senate, Mr. Speaker, for those acts have defined us, who we are today and what we shall be in the future. Number one, Mr. Speaker, Senate Speaker Ekwe Ethuro. I know for a fact, and I speak like this, Mr. Speaker, because I belong to his side of the political divide, then and even up to now, that part of the reason why he lost his job as Speaker of the Senate, and I don't think this is something that you need to be hearing, Mr. Speaker, is that on many occasions in the 11th Parliament, he was called to defend the position of the Senate against what you would call, quote unquote, the appointing authority. Some of them extremely powerful, Mr. Speaker. But because he stood firm in defense of this House, unfortunately, he never made it as he would have wished to return as a Speaker of this House. And I know that that's a huge price that he paid, but we continue to celebrate him. I celebrate him each day. He's one of the gentlemen who, when for one reason or the other I bump into him, I bow in honor because of what he did for this institution during very difficult times, Mr. Speaker, including days when police officers were sent to cordon the House of Parliament. He stopped debate for close to 30 minutes until police officers moved away from Parliament. And of course, you know who had sent police officers then. It's not an easy decision. That seat that you sit on, Mr. Speaker, sometimes calls on you to make very, very difficult decision in defense of this House, Mr. Speaker. And for that reason, I celebrate Senator Ekwe Ethuro. Secondly, the Senator Professor Kindiki served as our first majority leader on this side of the House where I lead, had the privilege of serving under him as a new senator, guided many of us that were new to Parliament then, even though even him was his first term of Parliament, had quickly learned the ropes and guided us, afforded us the opportunity to lay a firm foundation, and I believe that is what has guided many of us to secure and set up a firm foundation. Of course, he led in the institutionalizing of bipartisan approach on matters concerning the role and the place of Senate on devolution. That is something which, unfortunately, this House still continues to grapple with. And over time, I hope, as leader of majority, together with my counterpart, the leader of minority, we shall indoctrinate the current crop of colleague senators to appreciate that while we may disagree on the politics of the day, when it comes to matters defense of devolution and the institution of Senate, we fight together like brothers and sisters. We stand our ground together and we ensure that we stand and achieve that. That is one of the leading edicts and the teachings of Professor Kindiki on this House when he spoke many afternoons to speak. Of course, the Right Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Speaker Moses Masika Wetangula, then as leader of minority. Very interesting debates on many afternoons, Mr. Speaker. And I wish I said this when many of our colleague senators were here in the afternoon, because I continue to see in this House an unfortunate emerging trend, Mr. Speaker, where debate is losing its pace. I enjoyed those afternoons as a newcomer into this House, Mr. Speaker, where even though people are saying extremely difficult and sometimes harsh things to each other, those that were being spoken to kept quiet and allowed colleagues to make their point first before rising to counter whatever is being argued. That's a culture of debate. That's what Parliament is about, Mr. Speaker. And that's a culture which Senator Moses Masika Wetangula deeply espouses. Many afternoons kept this House entertained with his quotes from various books. Senator James Orengo, second leader of minority, Mr. Speaker, now Governor for Siaya, stood steadfast in his defense of the Senate, together with other senior counsels from this House, defended the Senate when we went to the High Court, Court of Appeal. Unfortunately, perhaps because of his many engagements now in Siaya County, Mr. Speaker, hasn't been able to do that at the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker. But of course, he's being ably helped by our colleague, the Senator for Nyamira, Senior Counsel Senator Omogeni. We celebrate his work. Senator Kiraitu Murungi led in the quest for strengthening of oversight role of the Senate in its the place of Senate in the Parliamentary Service Commission. And I wish I said this when our colleagues in PSC were there. Because when it became untenable and we felt that we were being shortchanged by our colleagues in the National Assembly, Senator Kiraitu Murungi one afternoon moved a motion in this House, Mr. Speaker, to have PSC split between two. To have a PSC for the National Assembly, one for the Senate. When that agitation began, at least, though for nuisance value and very little legal value of it, Mr. Speaker, because it will never have passed in the Assembly, at least got that third, or I think it was the fourth commission of PSC, Senator Mogeni, to take Senate seriously. And after that, there was a change in attitude in how PSC treated Senate as an institution. Of course, that danger always lurks, and you must remain vigilant. Senator Fatuma Dulo, led in the quest for strengthening of oversight role of a Senate, continues to celebrate her serving her second term as a woman senator. Not many women have been elected to represent counties in this House. She leads a distinguishing role, Mr. Speaker, having been elected twice to this House, of course, previously having then served as a nominated senator. I challenge to colleague senators who are nominated to know that you can start and build a stellar career from your nomination. That's what Senator Fatuma Dulo has done. Senator Kipchumba Murkomen served as Deputy Majority Leader, then later on as Majority Leader, stood steadfast in defense of Senate and devolution. I recall part of the very first committees that I enjoyed their sittings as a new member of this House was Devolution Committee, Mr. Speaker. And I wish, I don't know if Senator Abbas is in the House, Mr. Speaker, that the present Devolution Committee takes time to study the work that was done by the Devolution Committee of the Second Senate. Remember, that was a time that we were just turning the curve, Mr. Speaker, and getting into the cycle of devolution as a country. Therefore, there were many laws that needed to be passed, many challenges in the county governments. I recall the amount of work that they did. Traveled actually most of the afternoon. They missed plenary sittings, resolving disputes between governors and their deputies, county assemblies, and so on and so forth, Mr. Speaker. I wish that be the guiding spirit of the present Devolution Committee, chaired by the very able Senator Abbas. Senator Bill Okero, my first chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee, a committee whose job and duty I took with utmost zeal and enjoyed serving. Perhaps my best committee, the committee that I enjoyed serving in the most and gave me an understanding of the place of the institution of Senate, was under the chairmanship of Senator Bill Okero, Mr. Speaker. Served that committee, ensured that our reports, especially on BPS, Mr. Speaker, though ignored by the Treasury, will always find a way of either speaking and closing ranks with our colleagues from the National Assembly, despite the fact that those times there existed very frustrated relationships between both houses, Mr. Speaker, but also generally guided us in pushing for the place of devolution. When we began about conditional grants, Mr. Speaker, and so many amendments to the PFM, guided by Senator Bill Okero. Senator Dr. Boni Halwale, our whip, Mr. Speaker, chaired the first committee of the County Public Accounts and Investment Committee and led the committee in establishing institutionalization of oversight on county governments as contemplated in Article 96. This was the first PAC committee that dealt with county governments. Remember, CPAC before was dealing only, when we were unicameral, Mr. Speaker, was dealing only with our colleagues, with oversighting the national government. But Senator Boni Halwale led this committee with great honor and distinction. I remember the many reports that he tabled before this House. And on that, courtesy of the work that his committee did, many county governments reformed and actually ensured that there was prudent use of public resources, a culture that is quickly waning away, Mr. Speaker, and it's not something to be celebrated. I wish to challenge our colleague senators to take keen advantage of the reports, first of all, of CPIC, but second and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, even the audit reports. I see many occasions when I first came to this House, Mr. Speaker, when reports of Auditor General were tabled here by then Majority Leader, you'd see senators camper for the same, to pick a copy and see how their counties are doing. Nowadays, they lie idle, almost falling over on the clerk's table until they are carted away, Mr. Speaker, by the sergeant at arms. I think that's an area that as a House we need to improve and pay keen attention. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I've spoken about this, and it's something that I continue to engage my colleagues on the minority side about the need to perhaps rethink the place of oversight, to not only be reactionary to the audit reports brought by Auditor General, but even on issues that individual senators know about their counties. I am sure there can be a better process, and I proposed, and something that we haven't unfortunately been able to resolve, on that very sacred role of this institution, Mr. Speaker, can better be carried out as a complementary mechanism to what the Auditor General does, Mr. Speaker. Because unfortunately, much as we think the Auditor General knows everything about your county, I don't think the Auditor General, despite the fact that they may have all the reports, Mr. Speaker, would know more about Busia County and the challenges that ails them more than their senator who's here, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that's something that we need to perhaps make a decision about and move on motion. I promise the House, Mr. Speaker, that by the time we return after this short recess, we will have reached a common position with the leader of minority and propose something to the House. Senator Professor Peter Nyang', then Senator for Kisumu, chaired the Committee on County Public Accounts and Investment, led the committee in establishing county oversight mechanisms, also took a lead in strengthening oversight function by ensuring cabinet secretaries and other state public officers appeared before committees when summoned to. One of the best reports that you'll read about Parliament, Mr. Speaker, on Kenya Airways was courtesy of work that was done by a special committee led by Senator Professor Peter Nyang' of this House, with this House, Mr. Speaker. Senator Martha Wangare, now member of Parliament for Gilgil, began her career in this House as a nominated senator, has moved on to serve now, she's serving her second term as Member of Parliament for Gilgil constituency. Introduced and navigated amendment to the Employment Act, providing for the provision of pre-adoptive leave for parents seeking to adopt a child. You know, the bill was assented to and is now part of our employment law. Just the same way when you are expecting the birth of a child, Mr. Speaker, many people take leave. She introduced a very interesting proposal which senators and the National Assembly agreed to on what she called pre-adoptive leave. People going on leave as they prepare to adopt a child, Mr. Speaker. Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Remained steadfast in his quest for the protection of devolution, introduced legislation on the county boundaries to resolve long outstanding and delicate boundary disputes between various counties. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the county boundaries bill has never been concluded on, Mr. Speaker. It's presently before the House. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this Senate will take time to have a rigorous debate about that particular bill this time, Mr. Speaker, especially in light of the fact that we know that IBC, once properly constituted, Mr. Speaker, has got to do delineation of boundaries in this present year. And I believe it is Senate that can guide on dispute resolution between various counties, Mr. Speaker, and this is a present challenge that exists. In fact, I struggle to imagine a county. There are very few counties that don't have boundary disputes with their neighboring counties, Mr. Speaker, and it's something that Senate can guide on how to conclude on this process. Senator Dr. Agnes Zani, Mr. Speaker, was instrumental in introducing legislation for the protection and enhancement of devolution, including the very famous Natural Resources Bill, which has been introduced this term of Parliament, I think, by Senator Danson Mungatana. I hope, Senator Mungatana, you work and conclude on that bill as soon as now, because that bill is extremely important to all of us, because each county has a resource that they share or that they give to the country. Yet, on many occasions, counties don't benefit. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, is just to remember that across this journey, we have lost many of our colleagues, and would wish just to mention them because those were extremely sad times for us as a Senate when we've had the unfortunate incident of having to lose colleagues. Of course, first was Senator Mutula Kilonzo, Senator Kajwang Senator Kajwang Gerald Otieno, Senator Kariuki Gigi of Laikipia, in the 11th Parliament. Then, of course, in the 12th Parliament, last Senate, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we lost Senator Ben Okello of Migori County. I believe after that loss, Senator Eddie tried to replace him, but was unsuccessful in that quest. Thank God he succeeded this time. Senator Yusuf Haji of Garissa, replaced by his son, Senator Abdul. Senator Kabaka Boniface served as senator for Machakos. Senator Prengei Victor, and Senator Machage Wilfred of Migori, Mr. Speaker, colleagues that we lost across the way. Mr. Speaker, I will be remiss if I conclude on that speech without celebrating. I have celebrated almost every other senator that has made contribution. Of course, I couldn't mention many who are still serving in this house, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the right time to celebrate them will come. But I want to celebrate equally, Mr. Speaker, the staff of the Senate, led by the very able clerk, Jeremiah Makoha Nyegenye, for 3 terms now, has served as clerk of the Senate, leading the first team, the first staff that put together the institution of Senate. Of course, you know for a fact, colleague senators, that their work is to make us look good. Many of the citations that we make here, the presentations that we make outside there, are presented by the very competent staff of the Senate. I know that for a fact. I have served as staff welfare, Mr. Speaker, chair, for 5 good years. And I know that you will struggle out there to find staff as competent as staffers of Parliament, especially those of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. No offense to staffers that serve in the National Assembly. I would never have said that last time, but now I have the luxury of saying the truth that staff of the Senate are extremely competent, Mr. Speaker, and they understand and know their duties and role, and on many occasions prepare Senate. Therefore, I celebrate the work that has been done also by Jeremiah as he leads the team together with his 2 very able deputies as well, Mohammed and Eunice. They have led Senate the last 10 years quite remarkably, Mr. Speaker. Of course, with a lot of difficulty. You know, when you have battles with the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, because it's not easy to target senators, because whatever my colleague or counterpart in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, says to me, I can answer back because I'm elected like him. But shudder to imagine what staffers of Parliament, especially those of the Senate, go through when they are cited in the National Assembly in reports and mentioned on the floor sometimes because of inter-house battles. I don't think that has been easy for staffers of the Senate, because on many occasions they have been on the receiving end wrongfully, most of the time, if not all the time, from our colleagues in the National Assembly and the leadership therein, because of the stand that the Senate has taken. It's easy to find bogeymen in the leadership of the Senate staff, mostly in the place of Jeremiah. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I celebrate and do urge colleagues that we focus on to the next 10. I know we have started with difficulties, Mr. Speaker, but I give my assurance, first to the Senate and to the country, that we will find our bearing, we will find our space, we will close ranks, and this Senate, the current session, Mr. Speaker, I still believe will serve to be the best Senate that has been, other than the other two, better than even the other two, Mr. Speaker, because I know for a fact with great difficulty, as I say, there's always a silver lining in every cloud. I know, of course, at the moment, with all the difficulties that we are facing in the country, and even with us as an institution, people may begin to imagine or think that perhaps not much will be achieved. But I want to tell them, watch this space. This Senate will achieve great things for both for country and for the various counties, Mr. Speaker. With those very many remarks, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me. I celebrate you also, Mr. Speaker, for the work that you have done in the last few months. It hasn't been easy, but I know there will be a time to celebrate you even greater once you have steered us to greater success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for indulging me.
Senator Ngatana, I will allow a few of us to make certain interventions, and we'll speak for not more than 5 minutes so that we have time for the business in the order paper. The Honorable Senator Ngatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also make my comments as we celebrate 10 years of existence as a Senate. Mr. Speaker, I want to say I listened very carefully to what my majority leader was speaking, and I thank him because he gave us a very good summary of what we have been able to achieve as a Senate and the difficulties and the triumphs that we have seen in the last 10 years. Madam Speaker, the problems that this Senate has endured have something to do with the history in the formation. Madam Speaker, I was one of the members of that select committee that went to Naivasha. And it is good to recall, Madam Speaker, that the main target, the main thrust of our negotiations in Naivasha for the Constitution of 2010 was for the decision of whether we are going to go presidential or we are going to go parliamentary system of government. Madam Speaker, a lot of the other things were not really in focus. And I remember working round many hours, Madam Speaker, trying to find a compromise, meeting so many people, back, left and right. And Madam Speaker, when the deal was stuck that we were going to go presidential system of government, a lot of things, including the section that dealt with Parliament, were not given the real attention they deserve. Madam Speaker, I remember very well that we then, as members of Parliament, did not want to cede power. We did not want to cede power to a new house called Senate. So what was the solution? The solution was to propose a house that will be sitting just for 4 times in a year. The solution was to create a house similar to the one in the Kingdom of Eswatini, where, Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament are elected, and then from their various regions, they sit down to elect members of the Senate. In other words, it's a secondary vote. Then, Madam Speaker, we wanted to create a Senate similar to what existed then in Canada, where members of Parliament are the people who sit down and they do a secondary vote after the universal suffrage. And then, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, then the senators would come in. And what we had in mind, Madam Speaker, was to maintain all power within the National Assembly. And we were very clear at that time that we needed to just honor some legislators who had served term and who were willing to serve in the Senate. So, Madam Speaker, time has now come that because the committee of experts decided that they were going to give the senators universal suffrage, they were to come back by direct vote. Madam Speaker, then they did not give them the correct powers. Madam Speaker, then we have historical issues in terms of execution of our mandate. So, Madam Speaker, my prayer is that going forward, this House, Madam Speaker, would be a House that makes laws and have a second bite at the cherry. Today, Madam Speaker, during the statement hour, we were told of a law that was passed specifically at the National Assembly just to benefit those who wanted to make maximum profits from cashew nuts, Bixa, macadamia business. Madam Speaker, if that law had come to a second chamber, to a senior chamber such as ours, it would not have passed and the people would have been saved. And Senator Morango from Kirinyaga would not have had to cry because of the way the farmers from his areas are being mistreated because of that law that was passed in a haste at the lower house. Madam Speaker, it would help us to think about making approval sittings to just be the Senate's preview, so that, Madam Speaker, only senators, like in the United States where we borrowed this system, should be sitting to approve potential nominees from.
Time up, Senator Mungatana. Thank you. Senator Catherine Muma.
Thank you, Madam Senator, for this opportunity to contribute to this. I would like to celebrate, is it the second birthday or the second birthday of the Senate under the new Constitution. Madam Speaker, I happen to serve on the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution, and I would like to endorse what Majority Leader has said, that those who were before us, the first Senate and the second Senate, or the second Senate after independence and the third Senate, did a great job. They did a great job in modeling to the country what the rule of law looks like. Madam Speaker, I would like to single out names and recognize Senators James Orengo, Senators Anyang' Nyong'o, Senators Otieno Kajwang', Senator Bilokero, Senator Boni Halware, Senator Moses Wetangula, Senator Professor Kithure Kindiki, Mutula Kilonzo, and then later, Senator Mutai Kagwe, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. Later we had the Super Senator Sakaja, we had Mutula Kilonzo Jr., and as we move on for the lady senators, I also wish to celebrate our leading senator, Senator Dulo, who has been here 3 times. Madam Speaker, also celebrating our first elected senators, Senator Dulo, Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, Senator Susan Kihika, Senator Kavindu Mutama, and in this particular sitting, Fatuma Dulo, Senator Mudama, and Senator Tabitha Keroshe. Madam Speaker, the first Senate in particular fought for devolution. The truth is that the government of the day then was hell-bent on clawing back on devolution, and the senators in this house stood firm across the aisle and fought for devolution. Madam Speaker, I am hoping that the Senate in which I am currently serving will not be the Senate that will be on record as the Senate that will claw back on the rule of law, will not be the one that is going to claw back on devolution. Madam Speaker, I hope we can move further and recognize that we have a lot of work to do, and we can, for instance, strengthen intergovernmental relations, including intergovernmental relations between the Senate and the county assemblies, that we can also be the Senate that will get the collective responsibility of all arms of government to review the over 150 laws, Madam Speaker, that pre-existed the Constitution of Kenya 2010, that are on county functions or devolved functions, but have not been aligned to these functions. Madam Speaker, as we continue taking into account the current political situations, I will urge all senators across the aisle to do what we swore to be done, to actually be the senators that will help to move devolution a notch higher, the one that will truly help this country to enjoy what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 envisages under the Constitution. Madam Speaker, one last bit, I want to request that in considering intergovernmental relations, we will also be the House that will recognize the intergovernmental bodies that have worked, including bodies like the CAF, the Council of Governors, and the regional blocks that have been helpful in implementing devolution. I support, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Catherine. We'll have Senator Cheptumo William to take it up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me to thank the Majority Leader for that very comprehensive update to the House regarding the achievements and the challenges that have been faced this House in the 10 years. Madam Speaker, I served in the National Assembly for 15 years. And in the last 10 years, that is a time when this House, under the new Constitution, was established. And Madam Speaker, that time we used to understand this House differently. I used to understand differently. In a sense that even when, and I think I've said this before, when there was need to facilitate and to avail funds to this House for senators to be able to perform their functions, I was one of those members in the National Assembly, Madam Speaker, which really opposed. And I remember when the regulations came before the House, I was the chairman of the Delegated Legislation Committee that time. And we never saw the need, and I never saw the need as the chair of that committee that time. Madam Speaker, having been now in this House, it has already been said by the Majority Leader that one of the challenges this House faced is the fact that it didn't have resources, that senators were not being facilitated to be able to perform the functions. And I think, Madam Speaker, there will be a Kamukunchi after this sitting to discuss as a House on how best as a House we deal with that particular situation. Madam Speaker, unless and until this House is enabled to perform their functions. Madam Speaker, when I was a member of Parliament, you will allow me to refer to this because I want to draw comparison between what happened in that situation and now. The amount available for a member of Parliament to manage a constituency is the same amount availed to a senator to manage for Nairobi 17 constituencies. In Baringo now, I manage 6 constituencies using the same resources I used to manage one constituency. That is a challenge, Madam Speaker, and I think even as we appreciate the challenges this House has gone through, the successes it has been able to achieve, that is an area we need to look into. Madam Speaker, 10 years have gone, and devolution, as envisaged initially, was so that, Madam Speaker, we take more resources down to the people. Madam Speaker, today we are at 385 billion, if I'm not wrong, in this coming budget, from what we know. I still believe, Madam Speaker, Baringo, for example, a county with challenges, 65% arid and semi-arid, Madam Speaker, receives only about 6.5 billion Kenya shillings. It is unable to achieve and to perform and deal with matters challenging facing our people. So, Madam Speaker, I think this House, as we listen and appreciate the successes Senate has done over the years, it is time for us now, Madam Speaker, as a House to stand firm, claim our space, and continue to use the existing current understanding between the two houses, Madam Speaker, because I believe that there is some element of understanding now, so that, Madam Speaker, we reduce the tension that has existed before between the two houses. Madam Speaker, I am happy today that I participate in this House. And as we move forward, Madam Speaker, Kenyans and Kenya, Madam Speaker, will be...
Time up. Senator Eric Mogeni Okomo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to join my colleague senators and Senator Cheruiyot, Majority Leader, in celebrating the 10 years that the Senate has been in place. Madam Speaker, I will not repeat the salutations of senators who have left a mark in this House, and I think, Madam Speaker, the Majority Leader has done very well in giving a very good summary. But, Mr. Speaker, a challenge has been thrown our way this afternoon by the Majority Leader, that we must also leave a mark, Madam Speaker. Listening to the contributions this afternoon and the confessions, including what I've heard from Senator Mungatana, Mr. Speaker, it is evident, Mr. Speaker, that the people gathered in Naivasha had one agenda: to mutilate and weaken this House, Madam Speaker. And we must, Madam Speaker, as we celebrate our brothers who have moved from the other House, including Senator Cheptumo, Senator Halwale, Senator Mungatana here, Senator Onyonka, Senator Dr. Oburu, we must, Madam Speaker, wake up to the realization, Mr. Speaker, that this is not the House that Kenyans intended when they created a second chamber after Naivasha, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, what do we want to be remembered for, Mr. Speaker? Madam Speaker, our brothers who served in the first and second Senate made their contribution. Madam Speaker, my take is that a time has come, Madam Speaker, where this House must make a resolution, the way we made a resolution and moved to the High Court together in filing petition 284. We must pass a resolution, Madam Speaker, to revisit the power, the legislative power of the Senate, Madam Speaker. What was put in Article 96, Madam Speaker, was a deliberate effort to make us operate as a lower house, Madam Speaker. And the tragedy is, Madam Speaker, unlike the reference of that Senator Sesatini that Senator Mungatana has referred to, this Senate enjoys direct mandate from the people. Look at the votes that brought Senator Halwale here. Look at the votes that brought Senator Dr. Oburu Odinga here. Look at the votes that brought my friend Senator for Busia, and even myself, Senator for Nyamira, Madam Speaker. We cannot be sitting here every day rewriting the book of lamentations, Madam Speaker. A time has come, Madam Speaker, we must bite the bullet, Madam Speaker, and go to the annals of history as the Senate that put in place a bold move of getting back our correct legislative authority as an upper house, Madam Speaker. Listen to contributions by Senator Mungatana. We sit here, Madam Speaker, representing counties, Madam Speaker, yet we don't vet even cabinet secretaries. We don't vet the Attorney General of this Republic. We don't vet permanent secretaries, Madam Speaker. That should not continue, Madam Speaker. Let us pull together, Madam Speaker. This is for posterity. This is in public interest. This is for the good of our country, Kenya. This is in defense of devolution, Madam Speaker. So I'm urging my colleagues, as we celebrate 10 years, let us also leave a mark. Let us ask the question, what will we be celebrated for as the third Senate, Madam Speaker? We cannot, Madam Speaker, continue as if business as usual. No, things are not right, Madam Speaker. As we speak, Madam Speaker, your counterparts in National Assembly are controlling 60 million for repair of roads in each constituency. And you have no say as a senator. We tried to amend the Roads Act on the floor of this House, Madam Speaker. But our friends, our brothers from the National Assembly said they will never allow us to have any say on the usage of that money. Yet, Madam Speaker, as a senator, you need to know where has your governor put money for roads. You need to know where as the member of parliament put money for roads so that there is no duplication, Madam Speaker. We cannot allow, Madam Speaker, a situation where there is wastage of resources. Madam Speaker, a road is done by a governor today, a member of National Assembly will come the following day, Madam Speaker, and they do the same thing. Look at bursaries. You have a member of parliament dispersing bursaries. Women rep giving bursaries. Governor giving bursaries. Which household receives what? So, Madam Speaker, I pray, Madam Speaker, that this Senate will lead the way, Madam Speaker, in amending the Constitution so that we truly become an upper house. This is not about UDA. This is not about Azimio, Madam Speaker. This is about having a constitution.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Omugeni. Senator Boni Halwale. I cannot see Senator Wakili Sigei, so you can take the floor, Senator Boni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, is indeed a privilege for me to stand here and thank God that when I cast my eyes across the House, I see only two people, who are there on day one of the second Senate, which is the first Senate in this generation. It was Mr. Speaker, who are currently in this House. It was Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the clerk, Nyekenye, and myself, Mr. Speaker. We are the only ones surviving from that generation. So we want to thank God. Having thanked God, I want to thank the leader of the majority and ask the clerk, as the CEO of the Parliamentary Service Commission, did you really put thought into this process? Are we not the real problem? Why? How can you say this is a great day? When we have demeaned ourselves, we are reducing celebration of a national institution that changed the trajectory of development in this country, that brought tarmacs for the first time in the country, build level 4 and level 5 hospitals, teaching and referral hospitals for the first time in this country. We are celebrating it through a motion late in the evening. Today, life should have come to a standstill in the entire Senate so that we celebrate this day in a proper manner. We are demeaning ourselves. And I challenge the CEO, who is none other than the clerk. They have failed us. I challenge the Speaker. I challenge the leader of the majority. The resources are there. I know for a fact there is nobody in the current government who would not have supported a proper celebration of this Senate. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I want to tell members that this agitation of more funds and more funds and more funds to county governments, we should temper it. Temper it with questions of, when we send the money, what does it do? 10 years ago, Senator Uhuru, we gave devolved units 210 billion. And this year, we are going to give them 385. If you go in each and every one of those counties 10 years ago, the governors came out of their starting blocks like bullets. You'll find something innovative here, innovative there, but with the years, it has gone down. Now our county governments are employment bureaus, bureaus that employ friends and relatives of governors. Let us insist that the money going to county governments should be for development, and it should meet the mandatory 30% provision in the County Government Act. Madam Speaker, I don't want to speak for long. I'm so proud of you, and I know for sure that this little resistance that you're hearing from here and there will end with time, because in these 10 years, Senators have become MCS. MCS have become senators. Women MPs have become governors. Governors have become senators. People like Khalwale, who resigned my seat as senator, have since come back to the Senate. So the will is evolving, and I know that the common sense of the entire country will one day in our lifetime realize that you need to give Senate its position. I conclude by speaking to the issue of devolution in Belgium. In Belgium, the devolved governments are more resourced than the national government, the federal government in Belgium. In fact, if you go to Wayne, the Wayne state gives financial support to the federal government. This is where I want us to take Nairobi, so that people should not take Nairobi. Thank you, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Senator Oburu Odinga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. Madam Speaker, this is a great day for the Senate, and the Majority Leader has left. I would have really liked to congratulate the Majority Leader, Madam Speaker, because he is very eloquent. He's a young man, but I think he will go far, because he narrates exactly what happened, and in a very, very eloquent and easy way. Madam Speaker, devolution is something which was inherited from independence. Madam Speaker, at independence we had two parties. There was KADU and there was KANU. And KADU was advocating for what was then called Majimbo. But Majimbo, in its application, was actually devolution. Madam Speaker, at independence, we had a Majimbo constitution. And that Majimbo constitution gave us regional assemblies. Madam Speaker, that constitution gave us regional governments. And at that time, Madam Speaker, there was a passion for unity. Unity, uhuru na umoja, uhuru na umoja, uhuru na umoja. Madam Speaker, over the years, it was proved that uhuru na umoja was not devolving resources to the grassroots. Madam Speaker, it became a very skewed way of allocating resources to the mashinani. That is why, Madam Speaker, in Parliament, when Engineer Karwe introduced a bill to create CDF, CDF became the only thing that MPs were doing in their constituency. CDF became so popular that most members of Parliament were judged by how they used CDF. And this was a very small amount of money. And that is why, Madam Speaker, when delegates from all over the country converged at Bomas of Kenya, they came out with proposals to have a new constitution, and that new constitution was creating counties, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, those counties were big counties, counties which were, there were only 14 counties. Madam Speaker, when people went to Naivasha, those who went to Naivasha mutilated the proposals from Bomas of Kenya and created 47 counties, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think unless and until we create counties which are economically viable, which are big enough, like many, yes, we shall not have the counties being very effective. I've heard Honorable Kalwale saying that counties are more or less like employment bureaus. They are employing their relatives. That is true, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, counties should be units which deliver services to the people. And the the employment, of course, should be one of them, but the main target of devolved units should be service to the people and creating development to the people. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I think that this Senate has a long way to go, and we need to put the Senate back where it was in the Bomas draft constitution. Let us make the Senate an upper house. Madam Speaker, your office is a very powerful office. And that office, your office, which it really defends the devolution the way Honorable Cheriot was explaining here, Senator Cheriot. I think your office can make a big difference. Just make it a target that you want to make sure that there are changes made so that the Senate takes its place, which the National Assembly cannot do. The place of an upper house, the place for moderation of bills, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we should be able to do away with majoritarian dictatorship. Senate represents.
Unfortunately, Senator,
Thank you,
I think time is up for you.
Very fast.
Yes, Senator Essie Kinyori.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I want to support the statement by Senator Aaron Cheriot. Even as we commemorate 10 years since inception of the Senate, noting that we had it but initially abolished in 1966. So today, in a special way, I also want to recognize Senator Boni Halwale, proverbially the one-legged dancer, who welcomed me even before I was sworn into this Senate because of his soft spot for young people who are pursuing ambition in leadership. Secondly, I also want to say we've made quite a milestone. Today, Madam Speaker, you're seated there as a testimony for supporting women, you and Senator Catherine Muma. So that's a positive thing as we celebrate the Senate today. I also share a lot of similarities with the Honorable Member Martha Wangari, who in her youthful days was a student leader in Sonu, then led Warembo na Kibaki. Just like I do, I was a student leader in Masai Mara University, serving as the first female vice president of the student union, then ran Women for Ruto, that was mobilizing young people in support of the election of President William Ruto in the past campaign, and I'm now a nominated senator. Why I'm giving this is that the Senate is a very good breeding ground for young people who are pursuing leadership and for women generally in this country. Madam Speaker, though I'm challenged and I think the constitution architecture in general needs to be reviewed. Currently, the Senate is serving more of a token other than its rightful place at the upper house in this country. Madam Speaker, reviewing will give back the Senate its space in this country so that we are able to clearly provide the oversight that the people have been yearning for and in entrenching devolution. I also look forward to this Senate giving guidelines on civic education. Madam Speaker, as you well know, Article 100 of the County Government Act of 2012 well stated that the county government should be having civic education programs in their counties. But several years down the line, none of the counties have complied because their claim is we do not have a national framework on civic education. I hope this fourth Senate will bring that to actualization so that we do not have what we are currently seeing where a governor will issue roadside declarations of bursaries being issued to needy children, whereby citizens in the first place do not even have information on what to expect from their leadership. Civic education not only in county government but institutions in those counties, so that we are bringing up an informed citizenry. Madam Speaker, as I also wind up, I look forward to this Senate clearly stating to what extent did we have the 14 functions that were taken down to the counties implemented. Currently, we have so many wrangles which this Senate would have actually addressed, because you know when devolution came in, the Constitution was already in place in 2010. So most of the challenges we are experiencing currently were not imagined then. So as I sit down, I'm a very proud member to be part of the 4th Senate, and I look forward to being part of the success of this House, and as a breeding ground for us, me as a young person and as a woman, to transit to elective politics so that we can serve Kenyans better and fulfill whatever mandates they have given to us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We have some comments from Senator Okoiti Andrew Mtata. That should be the last one, because we are approaching 5:30.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to stand here on this important day when we celebrate 10 years since the restoration of the Senate chamber to the The Senate chamber is a very, very important institution. One, it has got fewer members than the National Assembly, so it is easy to be deliberative because people know each other, and it's easy to agree and pass a motion. And I support what Senator Mugatana said, that this Senate should be the House approving appointments. But we were basically, the House was basically emasculated in Naivasha. The Senate was also mixed up. If you look at Senates around the world that have a presidential system, and in presidential systems, I'm talking of the US.
Senator Omutata, I do not like to stop you midway, but unfortunately there was an earlier direction from the Honorable Speaker that at 5:30 this House does adjourn. Honorable Senators, earlier on the Speaker directed that Senator Eddie Okech moves a motion of adjournment under Standing Order 37. I will now invite Senator Okech to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the motion that pursuant to Standing Order 37, the Senate do now adjourn to discuss a definite matter of national importance, namely the deteriorating security situation in the country. Madam Speaker, for the avoidance of any doubt, or to be able to help us in these deliberations, I wish first of all to start by defining what deterioration is with regards to this particular motion. Oxford Dictionary defines deterioration as progressively or rapidly becoming worse. And Madam Speaker, security in context is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a state of being free from danger or any threat. If you look further in the same definition, it goes further and says that security is basically being able to offer protection to a country, a building, property, or a person from danger or threat. Madam Speaker, knowing that we are a country that is established under the Constitution of Kenya, Article 2 of the Constitution defines what this republic is, which basically makes us a country that has got some social contract that defines how we as a people must live. The framers of our Constitution therefore chose to dedicate an entire chapter, chapter 14, on what national security should be. In fact, Madam Speaker, if you read Article 238 of the Constitution, the principles of national security for which we all signed for when we endorsed this Constitution is clear that national security is the protection against internal and external threats to Kenya's territorial integrity and to sovereignty and its people, their rights, freedoms, property, peace, stability, prosperity, and other national interests. Madam Speaker, on 20th March of this year, we saw protesters in this country facing the danger and the threat of serious arrests that sometimes led to police killing some of the protesters. To be factual, on 20th, one man in Kisumu was killed, and this one has been documented by IPOA in carrying out their function under their own act, the IPOA Act, Section 6. And Madam Speaker, on 27th of March, we saw this indiscriminate, killing by the police continuing in this country, but more so, we saw serious attacks that seemingly were planned, and they were unceasing and very brutal to same people within the boundaries of Kenya called protesters. Madam Speaker, IPOA, on a letter written on 27th, a press conference that they did issue, indicated that in Migori County, there was a protester who was killed, and then number two, in Kisumu County, there was a protester who was killed, and IPOA also complained very seriously so on a number of incidences where we saw a serious indiscriminate arrest and illegal detention of some of these supporters of Azimio. Madam Speaker, worse enough is that we also saw serious thuggery and destruction of property in the Kenyatta's farm called Northland Farms, as well as the Odinga family business called the East African Spectre Limited, with people who are conducting these serious crimes, heinous crimes, against these two businesses in the country without the police taking action. Madam Speaker, under Article 244 and supplemented by the National Police Service Act, Section 24, the police have got a total responsibility to be able to protect property and to be able to protect life. What we saw happening to these two family businesses, which are individual businesses, Madam Speaker, was completely unacceptable. We saw young people going to a farm, cut trees, add time to even kill animals and carry some of the animals, and even add time to come back and burn down the same farm. All this happened within 6 hours that the police was watching, and I am, as a young person in this country, I am wondering if the state can sanction and even watch the destruction of property to somebody as high level as former president of state of Kenya without him being protected or without his property being protected. Then what happens to our Wanjiko in this country who does not enjoy such kind of privileges? What happens to a mere senator like my brother Matthew here or my sister Tabitha there if the property of somebody who has been the head of state cannot be protected? Madam Speaker, it is extremely sad that this coordinated and state-sponsored crime went further to the land of the poorest and the most downtrodden people of Kibera, to the extent that thugs sponsored by state, and I say sponsored because it is in the public domain, Madam Speaker, when the Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, together with Mr. Kimani Ichung'wah, who is the minority leader in the National Assembly, as well as Moses Kuria, who is cabinet secretary convened and made public pronouncements leading to these problems. Made public pronouncement to the extent I am moving a motion, you know the rules of the House, made public statements that...
What's your point of order?
Madam Speaker, I'm moving a motion. This is a problem because when you're moving a motion, I'm not supposed to be interrupted. People know the rule of this House. That's double standards, but it's okay.
Madam Speaker, because this can very well degenerate into a very emotive and emotional debate, I want to appeal to the mover of the motion to stick to the principle that if you must discuss the Deputy President or our colleague Kimani Ichung'wah, it should be through a substantive motion where you will support your argument with facts and figures. Madam Speaker, is it in order to allege that the above-mentioned people planned mayhem without bringing here a substantive motion?
Senator Eddy, I would like that you stick to the motion that you're bringing to the House without using names, because if you have to state names of certain individuals or personalities, it is then important that you substantiate or bring the evidence that then links them to whatever you are alleging. Those are very serious allegations.
Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this House is also guided by traditions and custom. Last week, when Senator Cheruiyot was moving a motion, in fact, there was a decision, a directive by the Speaker, that when somebody is moving a motion, no points of order would be allowed. In fact, Madam Speaker, you asked me personally to hold whatever point of order I had until he had finished, and then I would raise it at the appropriate time, Madam Speaker. What these interruptions when somebody is moving the motion do is to derail somebody's thought process. I am sure that we mean to have a sober debate this afternoon. I just want to urge that as we have agreed and discussed in previous meetings, let the rules apply fairly. If it has already been established as a custom that when the majority leader is moving, no objections are allowed or no points of order are allowed, I think what is good for the goose must be good for the gander, Madam Chair. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna. Senator Eddy, you take the floor, and as guided from the chair, you withdraw the names and proceed, and we will proceed as per the standing orders.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do respect Senior Boni Alwale, Senator, but it will be naive if we do not say things that are even in journalistic conversations that we see. But that said, Madam Speaker, I wish to actually advise my brother Boni and anybody who takes these things without a bipartisan approach that on April 6th, 1994, kids in Rwanda were playing in the morning. Children were going to school in the morning, Boni. Men and women were going to their work as if it was normal. And on 7th April, the same month, the same year, the country woke up to a killing of 80,000 people in that country, Madam Speaker. That ended up that those 80,000, 800,000 within that month died in that country, Madam Speaker. When we talk about things that Boni Alwale himself has watched on TV, has watched on social media of leaders in a country like this making reckless statements that lead to this kind of gangs forming, that leads to people mobilizing on tribal basis, that lead to people mobilizing on religious basis, this country, we can lose it within a second. So I am here to bring a motion that is not about a political statement on my own political faction, but I am here to bring a motion.
I have directed you for purposes of your moving the motion. Withdraw the names first, you'll have a chance to debate, and then move your motion and call the seconder.
Thank you so much,
Time has
Madam Speaker. I think for the respect of the time that you have given me, Madam Speaker, my thought process on the issue of attack of private property, I wanted to indicate that in Zimbabwe, when national leaders started this kind of castigation of
Senator
mobs,
Eddy, if you are interested in proceeding with the
I
motion,
have not withdrawn, I've not talked about any other name.
the names you mentioned earlier for purposes of the answer.
Madam Speaker, for the purposes of answered, I will not be able to withdraw those names because they are in public record and journalistic conversations that if needed for me to be able to bring in this house, I will be able to table them. And I want to be in record that if I needed to bring evidence and substantiate according to our own standing orders, Madam Speaker, this is something I'm willing to do because we are not in this house to lie to anybody in matters that are going to bring serious conflict in this country that can end up making us lose the country. So I want to be on record that if that is a requirement, then I will be able to bring those evidence to be able to substantiate substantiate the names that I've mentioned, Madam Speaker.
Eddy, I then direct you to table that evidence by tomorrow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Right.
I will do that. And as I conclude,
when the House business resumes tomorrow, you will table that evidence.
I will table, Madam Speaker, those particular evidence that utterances that led to this kind of violence that we saw yesterday, Madam Speaker.
And I'll give you 1 minute now. Your time is up.
Madam Speaker, I've been interrupting the entire motion. I beg for 2 minutes.
Proceed on in.
Thank you,
Proceed
Madam
on.
Speaker. I wanted to indicate that in some countries, Madam Speaker, we have seen this kind of attack on private property and attack on businesses in the excuse that some nationalistic leaders were giving them back to freedom fighters. In Zimbabwe, Madam Speaker, we saw the government of Robert Mugabe trying to give back land to what they call freedom fighters, and this escalated to the issue of even taking property from established businesses and established farms of other nations to the extent that that country was brought down. So to the extent that as a house established to protect the people, and in the spirit of Article 14 of the Constitution, I want to urge this House that we must be able to put our police to task, and we must be able to discuss the incessant and continued misuse of police as well as misdirection by leaders that is leading to serious insecurity issues in this country. With that, Madam Speaker, I beg to move this motion and beg the Senator of Narok, Senator Ledamo Lekina, to second the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second this motion on insecurity in the Republic of Kenya. Madam Speaker, in 1992, this country, because of tribal clashes, the Parliament then sought the need to be able to go around the country in a commission led by the Honorable former Member of Parliament called Kennedy Kiluku. In that report, which I'd like to invite all distinguished senators to go and read, there were details of what happened when we allow the rule of law to be misguided, when we allow insecurity of a country to be the order of the day. In 2007, there was a subsequent report by Justice Akiwumi during the post-election violence. Madam Speaker, I was perturbed yesterday when I saw the way the police service behaved when hooligans who were orchestrated by a group of known politicians were ferried all the way to Ruiru from different parts of this country to be able to go and attack private property. Madam Speaker, those acts of hooliganism something that led the framers of the Constitution to be able to establish what they called a free, or rather an independent institution called the police service. But yesterday, Madam Speaker, knowing very well that that area has got 3 police stations, I was shocked to see that the police from Ruai, the police from Gatunguru, and the police from Ruiru were all asked not to attend or not to interfere with what those hooligans were doing. We have had our fellow members, honorable members of parliament, making utterances. And what shocked me, Madam Speaker, is that NCIC were quiet, they were numb until today. Madam Speaker, I want to plead to Kenyans, and I want to tell Kenyans to wake up, because we have fought so hard for our freedoms. We have fought so hard for what we have today, for us to allow selfish individuals to drive this country into the dogs. Madam Speaker, this country is trading in very dangerous zones. We are affecting international trade. Very soon, nobody would want to come and invest in this country. Madam Speaker, there's a famous phrase where they talked about that when they went for the communists, I did not speak because I was not a communist. They went further and they went to the Jewish, I did not speak because I was not a Jewish. And when they came for me, there was no one to speak for me. I want to remind Kenyans that what happened yesterday for the former president of this republic, no one is safe. The next person who will be attacked are investors. The British who are living in Laikipia will also be attacked, because no one is safe with this kind of hooliganism. Madam Speaker, I want to condemn, and I want to remind the police that you're being used, yet you're paid peanuts. You're being used to be able to line other people's pockets, to be able to solve other people's issues, yet you are just left to wallow in poverty. You do not have good health insurance. You do not have a good place where you can be able to call a home. I want to call upon police in this country. Please, think twice. And the fact that yesterday it took 24 hours before the Inspector General of Police to be able to go in and see what was happening in Northland's land lead me to conclude that there's no longer independence in this country. There is no institution which is independent, which is against the Constitution. In fact, I'm calling for the resignation of the Inspector General of Police because he has failed. And this is sometimes this is what leaders, Madam Speaker, even as legislators, and we know the consequences, to invite the military to be able to take on security in this country, because the police service, first of all, it's no longer a service, it is a force, has failed in performing its task. We had the Inspector General of Police sending out warnings. If you really cared about Kenyans, why didn't you not go to rescue the former president's property when it was being attacked by hooligans?
Yes, wind up.
When it goes off, Madam Speaker, that's the tradition. As I wind up, Madam Speaker, and as I second this, I want to remind those who orchestrated or who perpetrated those acts of hooliganism that in law there is no escapatory. You cannot run away from what happened yesterday. And I can see ICC calling, because if Ledama can be called by NCIC because of simply making utterances.
Have you seconded the motion?
Before I could second, I second.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that the Senate do now adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the state of insecurity in the country. And honorable Senators, I propose that each senator, there are many senators who would want to contribute to this motion, each of the senators to take 3 minutes. We have about, this is 5:52, so we have 38 minutes. So if you want 5 minutes, then it means we'll have less senators speaking, so we can proceed with the 5 minutes. Senator William Kisang. Senator Bonnie Halole.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the Senator from Migori for this very important motion on a matter of gross national importance. Madam Speaker, may I send my condolences to family, friends of the children who lost their lives, and similarly extend my sympathy to business people whose businesses have been destroyed. I want to agree with the Senator that everybody must exercise restraint, Madam Speaker, so that...
What's your point of order? Pause this time.
Madam Speaker, I raise on standing order number 34-5. I wish to request that this House extend its hours of sitting until all senators wishing to contribute to the adjournment motions have contributed. I'd like to ask Senator Maanzo to second.
I now propose the question that this House do allow adjournment after all the senators have contributed to this motion. As many as are of that opinion, I now put the question that this House be adjourned after all the senators who intend to contribute to this motion have done their contribution. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say nay. Nay. The we will now call a division. Let's put a division. I have now called a division. I have given the direction, please. Clerk. Ring the bell for 2 minutes, clerk. Can you, Sergeant at Arms, can you proceed to close the door? Allow him in. Allow him in. Tell us, can we have tell us?
Check if the speaker has a vote. Okay, fine. You mark quickly.
Are you ready? I now put the question that all senators who intend to contribute to this motion be allowed to contribute, and adjournment to take place after all the contributions are received.
Abbas Sheikh Ahmed, Abdulrahman Miraj Abdullahi, Adan Dulo Fatma, Asige Crystal Kagehi,
I vote yes.
Boy Isa Juma, Cherarkei Samson, Cheruyot Aaron Kipkirui,
No.
Chesang Alan Kiprotich, Chute Mohammed, Ekomwa James Lomenen, Haji Abdul Mohammed, Kajuang Moses Otieno, Kamar Margaret Jepkoech, Kamau Joseph Githuku, Kathuri Murungi, Keroche Tabitha Karanja, Kalwale Dr. Boni,
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Kibwana Hamida, Kipkiror William Cheptumo, Kisang William Kipkemoy. Sorry.
I vote no.
Kisang William Kipkemoy, Korir Joyce Chepkoech, Lelegwe Steve Tumbesi, Lemaletian Hezina, Maanzo Daniel Kitonga.
I vote yes.
Mazayo Stewart Mwachiru, Maina Veronica Waheti. She can vote. She has a vote.
I vote?
She has a vote.
I vote no.
Mandago Jackson Kiplagat, Mbogwa George Mungai, Methu John Muhia, Mogeni,
I vote yes.
Senator Mohamed Shakila Abdallah, Senator Montet Betty Batuli, Senator Muma Catherine Muyeka.
I vote yes.
Senator Muma Catherine Muyeka.
I vote yes.
Senator Mundigi Alexander Munyi. Senator Mungatana Johnson Buya. Senator Murango James.
I vote no.
Senator Murango James Kamau.
No.
Senator Mudhama Agnes Kavindu. Senator Mutinda Maureen Tabitha.
I vote no.
Senator Mwaruma Jones Mwashusha. Senator Mwenda Gataya Mofaya. Senator Mwinyihaji Mohamed Faki. Senator Mwizagu Raphael Chimera. Senator Nderitu John Kinywa. Senator Ngugi Joe Joseph Nyotu. Senator Nyamu Karen Njeri. Senator Oginga Oburu. Senator Ogola Beatrice Akinyi. Senator Ojenda Odhiambo Tom. Senator Okenyuri Esther Anyeni.
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Senator Okech Eddie Gisheru.
I vote a big yes.
Senator Okoiti Andrew Omtata.
I vote yes.
Senator Olekina Ledama.
I vote yes.
Senator Omar Mariam Sheikh. Senator Onyonka Richard Momoima. Senator Oroba Gloria Magoma. Senator Osotsi Godfrey Atieno.
I vote yes.
Senator Recha Julius Murgor. Senator Roba Ali Ibrahim. Senator Seki Lenku Olekanar.
I vote no.
Senator Sifuna Edwin Watenya.
I vote yes.
Senator Siengo Beth Kalunda.
I vote yes.
Senator Dhangwa Paul Karungo. Senator Tobiko Peris Pesi. Senator Wafula David Wakoli. Senator Wakili Hillary
I vote no. I vote no.
Senator Wakili Hillary Kiprotich Sige.
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Senator Wamatinga Wahome. Senator Wambua Enoch Kio.
Is the tally complete? Clerk, can we have the tally if it's ready? Can we have the tally? I want to announce the results of the vote. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. First of all, Senator Murango, when the speaker is on her feet, you first resume your seat. Senator Murango, what is your issue?
Madam Speaker, if you look at those papers, one was grabbed by Mr. Andy and filled both papers, but we are 11-11. So, no, let me talk. That's why I was here. No. So we are not teaching Kenyans. No, we are not allowing resources which has been cooked. Yes. One. Did you sign? Did you sign? No.
Have you signed?
Okay, Madam Speaker, I have not signed mine. Why?
Clerk.
No, you, Tulia Sifuna. Mosmos. Yes, you didn't count. Aye.
Clerk, can you confirm that tally? Yes. Reconfirm that tally. Two agents come here. Come here. Let me give a direction. I did vote. Let me give a direction. I did vote. Reconfirm the vote, clerk, and give me a guide. Your point of order, you are studying orders, studying order 98, the point at which you raise a point of order. After results verification, it looks like it's a tie on 11-11. They have verified.
Madam Speaker. No, before you announce the tally, Madam Speaker. Before you announce the tally. You know, Madam Speaker, before you announce the tally, Madam Speaker, this afternoon, I want to begin by saying that Majority Leader did very well. You did very well this afternoon. You did very well, and you set the tone. And Madam Speaker, following on that tone, we wanted to have a debate in this House this afternoon. And Madam Speaker, this House, first of all, before we even look at our standing orders, Madam Speaker, we must acknowledge, and you are a lawyer, Madam Speaker, a distinguished lawyer. Madam Speaker, the Constitution in Article 122, 122 sub-article 2, says that on a question proposed for decision in either house, the Speaker has no vote. The Speaker has no vote. And Madam Speaker, if you go to Article 260, which has the definitions of who is a Speaker or not, a Speaker is anybody on the chair. Is a Speaker. And Madam Speaker, so Madam Speaker, while you are occupying that seat, Madam Speaker, and acknowledging that the Constitution is our supreme law, you should not cast a vote. You are sitting in that chair as a Speaker. Madam Speaker, forget about any other standing order that is contrary to the Constitution. Senator Cheruiyot, any other standing order that is contrary to the provisions of the Constitution is null and void. Is null and void. You cannot create a standing order. You cannot create a standing order that is contrary to the clear provisions of the Constitution. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. So, before you make up your point of order, I'm on a point of order. And you know, I always say that the decisions we make today will bite you tomorrow. Senator Cheruiyot. Yeah. So, I beseech you, Madam Speaker, to respect the supremacy of the Constitution. You cannot, if you read, Madam Speaker, if you read High Court Decision 284, the one we filed before the High Court, Madam Speaker, and I can table that decision on the floor. The court said that any standing order that is in contravention of the Constitution is null and void.
What's your point of order? Then I'll make a finding.
Madam Speaker, indeed, the senator for Nyamira has made a point. But the same Constitution, Madam Speaker, defines under the Constitution who is the Speaker. Yes. It defines under the Constitution who is the Speaker. Under the Constitution, there's only one speaker. But under the standing orders, relax, relax. You know enough. Relax. When you shout...
Can you allow him to finish just the way Senator Mugeni was finishing his submission?
Madam
in
Speaker,
silence.
Madam Speaker, I'm glad you are listening to me. The same Constitution is quoting knows only one speaker. All the people are creatures who sit in that chair, are creatures of the standing orders. So if you are there by dint of the standing orders, then the standing order that provides that you should vote must be observed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is your... And make it short.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, Madam Speaker, because I don't know why we are fighting over a matter that was long settled in this House, Mr. Speaker. This is not the first time that this point of order is being raised in this House. And it is for that reason, Madam Speaker, if you read the first standing order of the Senate, and I referred to it this afternoon during my statement, you will find that this situation had not been envisioned. But because previously somebody else has risen on a point of order like Senator Omogeni, then we have standing order number 86-6, Madam Speaker, which I want to invite Senator Omogeni to read, because there was need to further define who is the speaker and what happens when one of the senators who has an original vote is on a seat, as you are this afternoon, Madam Speaker. Standing order number 86-6, Senator Omogeni, was written for the kind of situation that we have right now, so that when the speaker or the presiding officer is a senator who has an original vote, the standing order permits them to vote. That is the purpose of this standing order.
I will now rule on the matter so that we are able to proceed to the debate. Under Standing Order 84-3, if you can go there with me, each senator does have a vote. And under Standing Order 86-6, where the presiding officer has an original vote, the presiding officer shall cast his or her vote from the chair. So I will now proceed to rule on the vote. I cast my vote as per the standing orders, and we will now proceed to announce the tally, and we proceed on. It's a tie. The ayes have 11, the ayes have 11, and the nays have 11. It's a tie, so the motion is lost. Senator Boni, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Under Article 98, sergeants, please withdraw the bar. Senator Boni, proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order, Senator Okia?
I would like to go back to the Constitution, and I would like to bring to your attention Article 259, Clause 3.
The matter has been ruled on.
B. No, it cannot overrule the Constitution. You are ignorant of the Constitution, does not mean the Constitution does not apply. There is a ruling made in ignorance of the law. Is a ruling by incarium, it carries no weight. A ruling made in the ignorance of the law is no ruling. Yes, I agree, and that's why I want to be guided. Look at Article P. Article 259, 3B. Any reference in this Constitution to a state or other public office or officer or a person holding such an office includes a reference to the person acting in or otherwise performing the functions of the office. We cannot disregard the Constitution. We are disregarding the Constitution by saying that the Speaker is voting. Yes. The Constitution overrules the standing orders. The Constitution overrules. She's the Speaker. She's acting. She's acting. That article is clear.
Honorable members.
Article 259.
Let's have order in the House.
259, Clause 3B. 259, Clause 3B. You cannot overrule the Constitution.
Anything made in
Can you
violation of
speak
the
through the
Constitution
chair?
is
Senator
null
Okia.
and void.
Senator
Let us respect
Okia.
the Constitution, or we have no business here.
Senator Okia, now resume your seat, please.
This is not activism in law.
Senator Okia. Senator Okia, you are out of order. Senator Okia, you are now out of order. Warning number 1. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Senator Boni, take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, they have given you.
Anyway, you are sleeping in the house, Cheriot. Are you sleeping in the house?
Senator Eddy, once you have the floor, you speak to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in order for Senator Boni to refer to a senator of this house with names that are not the senator's names, including shouting at Senator Okia Mtata as a mere activist? I wish you have shouted and called Senator Okia Mtata an activist.
Honorable Senators,
you have called him an activist.
Order, Senators.
Is that in order?
Senator Boni and Senator Murango. Senator Eddy has the floor at the moment. He must be heard in silence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is very look at Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddy, if you're not interested in contributing,
I am, but please,
can you focus?
Mr. Speaker, protect me from the majority leader.
How can I protect you from a laughter?
No, it's not a laughter. He's pointing at me and
proceed.
And threatening me with his hands, Mr. Speaker. I feel threatened, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, we had brought a very serious issue of debates here, and senators who wish to contribute to this issue. And I'm glad that the substantive speaker is back, Mr. Speaker. This is a very serious issue that is of serious national importance. And therefore, when a fellow senator has gotten up to give some clarity to the extent that my brother, Senator Omtata, was just educating some members of this house who have refused to understand the Constitution, like one of the senior senators here. Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's appropriate for him to be referred to the names that are not his. Our standing orders are very clear that when a speaker is in this house, they must be referred to with their names and as senators of this house. So therefore, it's not in order for Senator Boni to refer to a very senior member of this society as Senator Okia Mtata as a mere activist. And I request you, Mr. Speaker, that may Senator Boni Aluale please withdraw referring to Senator Okia Mtata as a mere activist. In any case, Senator Okia Mtata qualified so well, and because of his work as a for this country, he got voted on some serious worth than probably even the senator who has been voted for other reasons of standing closely with some individuals in power. So he has to respect Senator Okia Mtata. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni, whenever senator rises and he wishes to refer to another senator, the standing orders are very clear. You refer to your colleagues as Honorable Senator so and so. Kindly, Senator Boni, proceed to withdraw that statement calling the Honorable Senator for Busia, Senator Mtata, a mere activist. Please proceed to withdraw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the record of this House will show that while I had the mic, I have never spoken anything near or close to it. But because we want to make progress, the things I said when I was off the mic, when we were waiting for the division, Madam Speaker, I want the record to be
Let me
clear.
confirm exactly what your statement was. Senator Boni, just have your seat. I'm informed that when you're making those derogatory remarks, because indeed they are, you are off the mic and you had not been given the floor. Still, it amounts to a disorderly conduct. So just proceed, and it's not on record. It's not on record. So if it's on record, it need not be expunged. But from the chair's point of view, it amounts to a disorderly conduct, and that then attracts a caution. And should you proceed in that line again, the chair will ask you to withdraw from the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed, I'm glad that you have been guided correctly. And what I said, this is not a case of activism. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, sir, I withdraw and wish to continue. Mr. Speaker, hypocrisy. Mr. Speaker, hypocrisy is a very bad thing. The same Olekina, the people of Narok are waiting for you to attack with gusto.
Honorable Boni Kalwale. Honorable Boni Kalwale, please. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m. Time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Wednesday, 29th March 2023 at 2:30 p.m. And Honorable Senators, as I exit, I'll be coming back in the next 3 minutes so that we can prosecute the business of the Kamkunji. Thank you.